Hi there, welcome to the office chat of March 2017. What has happened in the last couple of weeks in the field of terrorism and counterterrorism? Well, this month we saw the commemoration of the attacks in Brussels on the metro and on the airport. And on that very same day, a man drove his car into a crowd of people on a bridge and then he stepped out of his car, took a knife and tried to enter British Parliament. In this attack in London, 3 people were killed on the bridge and one officer was stabbed by the man, unfortunately died before the attacker was killed himself. And of course a lot of attention worldwide because it was at the heart of the capital, London, at the heart of the political center. And of course because IS very soon came with a reaction, an official statement. And it said that the attacker was a soldier of the Islamic State who was executing the operation in response to calls to target citizens of coalition nations. So a statement by the so-called Islamic State. And that raises of course questions. Is this an IS attack or not? Was this man directed to attack British Parliament, or was he inspired, or nothing at all? So IS of course tries to give us the impression that they're powerful, that they can direct people to do these kind of things, but facts so far do not see any clear link, and it's in generally portrayed as a lone wolf attack. But how lonely, how individual was this attack? Was he inspired, was he directed or not? And it raised a discussion in the field of scholars into terrorism and counterterrorism about the concept of lone wolf terrorism, or what we prefer, lone actor terrorism. A lot of people say actually that doesn't exist, it's overrated, people put that label on cases and that very often we see in hindsight that they didn't deserve that label because they weren't that lonely. Well, one scholar that I'd like to mention, I'm a big fan of Jason Burke. He's a journalist, an expert in the field of terrorism. He wrote a book, this is an older one, Al-Qaeda, the True Story of Radical Islam. Many other books, a man who's been out there, Afghanistan, Pakistan. And he wrote an article in the British daily The Guardian on March the 30th with the title, "The Myth of the Lone Wolf Terrorist." And he writes that in many cases where it's initially claimed that this was the work of a lone wolf, it later turns out that these people did have ties to networks or were even instructed or directed and helped to execute the attack. And I think he's right in the sense that we've seen a lot of cases, for instance in France, where these were known as lone wolf attacks. And later we found out that these people did have ties, were even helped, assisted, were given weapons, etc. And that much of the soldiers of IS are in fact in one way or another connected to IS. And if we, if with that knowledge look at the debate of lone actor terrorism, we see that actually very few cases are really cases of people who act totally on their own. Nonetheless, we use the label very often. Well, let's move to another part of the world. Last month we discussed the violence in Pakistan and we expressed worries about the possibility that there would be more and more violence. Well, unfortunately also this month we saw yet another very lethal attack, in this case in the northwest part of Pakistan. An attack, 70 people wounded, 24 died in an attack by a faction of the Pakistan Taliban just outside a mosque in an area with a lot of Shia Muslims, showing the sectarian nature of the violence in Pakistan, but in fact in many other parts of the Islamic world, Syria, Iraq, but also think of Yemen. Also in Bangladesh, also South Asia, we saw a number of suicide attacks. Very often it doesn't get that much attention what happens in Bangladesh, but I think this is worth mentioning. A suicide attack just outside the international airport of the capital Dhaka, and a suicide bombing that killed 7 people that were watching an ongoing police operation. So it's not only Pakistan, also Bangladesh, other parts of South Asia. Then if we look at Syria and Iraq, we see that IS is losing ground, but still managed to maintain parts of Mosul, West Mosul, but they lose neighborhood after neighborhood, lots of people killed, also in airstrikes, a very brutal fight, lots of civilians who die, unfortunately. Other pockets, Raqqa is threatened to be surrounded, other parts, other cities in Syria. So it's losing ground, but it's a very slow process to liberate these areas. And although I do believe IS might be defeated militarily, but it takes a long time. Nonetheless, Raqqa and Mosul could fall in the coming weeks and months. And many experts are wondering, and then what's next? How is this organization recover from that? What new strategies can we expect? But so far, they still hold on to these cities, but a lot of casualties on both sides. And then finally, I'm very happy and proud to tell you that together with Peter Grol, a colleague of mine, we launched a new book. It's unfortunately in Dutch, and there's no concrete plans to translate it into English because it's very much aimed at explaining the public about the lives of Dutch jihadists. It's called Dutch Jihadists, from naive idealists to seasoned fighters, die-hard terrorists, and it gives the life stories of a number of Dutch men and women who joined jihadist movement. I think it's very interesting for a wider audience to try to understand who are these people and why do they go? What are their motivations? Who are they? So if you read Dutch, I can highly recommend it, of course, and maybe I'll make sure that I write a shorter piece in English and put it on an open source publication site so that also outsiders can have an idea of what were our main conclusions. That's it for this month. See you next month.